Well, hello, and good evening, and welcome to Real Talk. My name is Mark Angelo.
And I'm Lena Aria.
And I promise I'm Mark Angelo. I know sometimes I've been, but you know.
Have you?
Yes.
When? You've always been Mark. I
Yeah.
fell for Mark a long time ago.
Anyway, guys, thank you so very much for joining us today. And today we have got a special treat for you. We have a special guest. Many of you know her. Her name's Dawn Ennis. She successfully transitioned from broadcast journalism to online media following another transition that made headlines. In 2013, she became the first trans staffer in any major TV network newsroom.
She was the first out transgender editor at The Advocate and the first trans journalist invited by Caitlyn Jenner to interview her one-on-one in her home.
That must have been exciting. After a year serving as news editor, she transitioned to a new role with her own company, Anybody, launching news video production for Advocate.com. She also now is writing for the most respectful and most popular entertainment news site, ET Online.
She has 7 years experience in TV news management. She also has several years experience as an assignment editor, segment producer, and writer, more than a decade as a line producer, and a solid 3 years as a field producer and videographer. She's done every job from ripping scripts to running a newsroom.
She's also a social media maven with thousands of connections and followers all around the world. She blogs as well at lifeafterdawn.com.
In her 30-year media career, she has earned more than a dozen awards, including 2 Emmys. With the blessing of her 3 children, Dawn retains the most important job title she's ever held, Dad.
Now, welcome to the show, Dawn. Okay, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh no.
Oh no, wait a minute, let's see.
Come on back.
How about now? Is it
There
working
you
now?
go, we got you.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Leave it to the television media maven who can't figure out the mute button.
I tell you, Google Hangout is, I mean, it's got so many glitches and stuff. And actually, they were pretty good at one point. They had all these great fillers and stuff like that, or filters. And I don't know what happened.
No, don't blame Google. This is me. I'm just a media maven, that's all. I didn't know how to hit the unmute button. I figured out how to unmute it. I just didn't figure out how to unmute it. So thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I'm very pleased to be with you on your radio show.
We're pleased to have you. Thank you so much. You know, we kind of go a long way in a sense.
We've had our ups and downs, haven't we?
Yeah, but you know, in the end, we love you.
I love everybody, and I'm glad to see that you've relocated to someplace warm and sunny, and I hope you're happy there.
We definitely are. Actually, it's amazing. And you see the background here. These are all real-time pictures that we've taken along our walk. We're a mile and a half from the beach, and it's just, I'm sure you've heard of Wilton Manors. Well, we're like 10 minutes from Wilton Manors, which is Victoria Park, and it's very LGBT friendly. It's just a wonderful place to live.
Well, good for you. And also congratulations on your decision to go forward as Mark, and for Lena to have Mark in her life again. I'm happy for you both. I don't have a preference either way. I'm just happy that you're happy. That's really all that matters.
You know, and it's one of those things that it takes, you figured after 13 years of being Mark that I would have had it figured out. It's the changes that happened in my life with the events that happened between Lena and I, and the accident she had, and just so many things that really happened in our life that got me in a place of uncertainty for a while there. And I needed to reacquaint myself with myself. I don't regret what I did. And there's a question there later on that I want, because I feel that we have a lot of camaraderie, you and I, because of that. And I think that it's a wonderful thing that happens when you kind of lose yourself for a moment and then find yourself again. I don't know if I'm making any sense because I'm rambling, but I think you gotta.
Transition is a lot more common than you think, and a lot more common than anyone knows. And although it's been seen as shameful, I think it's actually part of the process. And speaking of the interview that you mentioned, even Caitlyn Jenner herself had made a decision at one point to abandon transition. So if the most famous transgender woman in the world can stop and start again, I think that everyone else should deserve a pass too.
Definitely. It's part of discovering self. I mean, I think that's what a lot of us who transition do. We go deeper in ourselves than the average individual cares to do so.
I mean,
And I was explained to me that by some of the so-called leaders of this movement that the reason detransition gets such a bad rap is nobody wants to give credit to those who say it's not real, and for those who don't detransition, they feel as if we're invalidating their experience by detransitioning, and everyone's experience is different. You can't judge what happened to me and decide that's right for you, or vice versa. I wish that people would just recognize that we're all very diverse and very different, and our transitions are different too.
yeah, and detransitioners are very much always going to be a part of the transgender community.
Just because you don't call yourself trans doesn't mean you're not trans.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think that what happens with those of us that venture in the detransition route is that we want to believe that what we did was a mistake, because we have to justify our detransition. And in justifying that, we end up blurring the lines up dramatically and hurting people while we're at it. And I know we made an apology a while back, and it's never too much to re-apologize time and time again for the things, the awful things that we did and said, and just the craziness that we created. And it was all part of the inner turmoil that we were going, not so much as a couple, because we never really had a problem as a couple. It's just challenges in your life, your beliefs, your accident, just things that all just got together and really messed things up. And that created the whole drama and stuff.
I think a lot of people were sad to see that there was this whole development of you guys being ex-trans, and whatever transpired in the past, I think you have to sort of like put that behind you at some point. But it's good to acknowledge that there was turmoil, and then say, but don't judge me based on everything that happened in the past.
Exactly. And we are ever-changing individuals, and we're humans, and we make mistakes often, more than not. That's what helps us grow and evolve as humans.
So what can I tell you?
Yeah. So we got a bunch of questions lined up for you. And also, let's check. We've got a little chat room for those of and the individuals that actually want to join us on chat, or you can call us at the number that we have above here on the screen. I can never get this right. 575-519-5930. And you could text us there, you could call us there, or you could join us on chat with your question, comments, and concerns, and add to the array of questions that we have lined up for Dawn today. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Tell us a little bit about your career, and has it changed since you transitioned?
Wow. It sure has. I was a television journalist, and for a couple of years after I acknowledged my transgender status, I wasn't ready to acknowledge it to the rest of the world, even to my family, for a long time, even to myself. But I was mostly concerned because given the state of where things were in 2010, 11, 12, there wasn't a Caitlyn Jenner, Laverne Cox, Janet Mock. Even Chaz Bono was sort of just a new wow experience that people didn't really think was at all something that they could understand. And I was reluctant to be a trailblazer and possibly lose everything I had built. And what I wanted more than anything was a full-time job, a union to protect me, to make sure that if anything did happen after I came out, that I wouldn't lose my career. And I did. After losing my television career, I transitioned, as you mentioned, into online media. I've been working in online media now for, let's see, 2014 to 2016, almost 2 years. And I'm still working in a writing capacity, which is what I love. I love writing. However, in the last couple of months, I just lost my wife to cancer, and that means I lose yet another career, this online job I had at The Advocate as a news editor. I had to surrender it because the job's in LA and my kids are in Connecticut, and I just couldn't see the wisdom in moving my children from their home, the only one they've ever known, from where their mother lived, and I am much easier to transplant. So I went back to Connecticut, and while I'm doing some work for The Advocate, including video production and writing for some other publications, as you mentioned, I'm sincerely, desperately looking for a full-time job. If not in journalism, then hey, whatever it takes to put food on the table.
So you're finding that after you transition, and this happens to a lot of us, you're not seeing the opportunities that you had before.
I'll give you an example. Don Ennis was able to quit one job and get another job within a week. I have great contacts and networking, and I have a great reputation, a sterling reputation for being good at what I did. I didn't quit a job except for once, and when that time I did, I was able to land something else within a couple of days. But I knew that I could if I ever had to. Dawn Ennis went on an interview for a similar job to what I had at NBC after working at ABC. And NBC, someone there told me in an email that they didn't mean to send to me, that they were so sick of all the drama and wish that I would just go away. They meant to send it to someone else, and instead they sent it to me. One of those kind of things. And I didn't get the job, not because of that person, because, well, whatever. But, you know, they were looking for someone younger. They're looking for someone different. Probably looking for someone not trans. And one HR person told me I was radioactive, that the headlines and the tabloids had basically rendered me unemployable. So I spent most of that summer of 2014 trying to make, you know, pennies stretch. And I experienced exactly what a lot of trans people do, which is unemployment and underemployment. Had to give up my apartment, couldn't afford to rent anymore. I had to move in with a friend, faced possible homelessness, slept in my car rather than a hotel. You know, these are the kind of things that we all experience. And even in Los Angeles, working for The Advocate, I was collecting cans and I was eating ramen noodles and walking to work because I needed to be able to save money for my family. The person who I lived as before was making 6 figures, and I was making 25% of that. And there's really only one reason for that, and it's because I came out as trans.
One of the things that I believe as a community that we really need to work strongly on is creating job opportunities for each other. The people, and there are some successful trans individuals out there that have power and have ability to be able to create a job market for those that aren't able to be able to get their own jobs through the normal means. So there's a lot of things that as a community, health issues or healthcare issues and things like that we need to work on. But one of the greatest things is to be able to create our own market so that we can become strong enough.
I know that for me, I mean, I was employed in television as well, Don, for 20 years. I mean, I wasn't as big as an Emmy award-winning producer as yourself, but I was a camera operator and I was being hired by the big guns like NBC and CBS and ESPN. I was doing a lot of sports television. And when I transitioned, I was also working for a very long time with a Christian organization in Nashville. And they immediately dropped me completely and without any question. Obviously, Southern Baptists aren't too keen on transgender, if you know what I mean.
I do.
So basically, I was out of 3/4 of my 6-figure income as well, and I turned to, you know, regular broadcast television, and sports was what I was doing at the time. I went up to New York, did several games up at Madison Square Garden, and
Nice.
it kind of fizzled out eventually. But you know,
Sorry.
those things, yeah, it's difficult as a trans.
No, you don't have to be an Emmy award-winning producer to have been good at what you did, and I'm sure you were top of your game. I think that the problem is, and this is very true of most of television, people think of TV news as this liberal bastion with everybody's bleeding hearts. It's just as conservative as every place. There are people of all kinds working there. And even though they report on lots of liberal and LGBT things, it doesn't mean the people behind the scenes are so liberal-minded. There are a lot of people who work in the media business who have very conservative values and see us as odd.
I mean,
I had one news director tell a friend of mine who went to bat for me, he didn't want my drama in his newsroom. And I'm trying to figure out what drama he's talking about. Maybe he's talking about from 3 years ago that the New York Post created. But of course, you know, once people get an impression, it's really hard to sort of undo it. I think you guys face that same problem in terms of, you know, you've created an impression about how you were and you've evolved. I wonder how you guys managed to, you know, convince people to put their trust in you.
You could just, all that we do is come from a heart. And I think one of the things Lynn and I have always been is very heartfelt, you know, and even when we're going through our craziness and challenges, it was heartfelt. And we never really meant to hurt anybody. I think it was just trying to deal with our own issues. And I think we all, as trans or non-trans in the world, face issues. And sometimes we project these issues out in certain ways that we shouldn't. But it's all learning, and it's all, you know, breaking free, you know, from those chains that we get ourselves into.
Well, what has been the hardest struggle for you since transitioning? I know that you touched on the issue of employability, but I guess maybe given the recent events in your life, I would imagine one of the hardest struggles is what you're going to probably mention.
Nothing has been harder than losing the love of my life twice. I lost her to separation. I lost her because I transitioned. I became the bitch who killed her husband, to quote her. But even if I struggled with the fact that we were no longer going to be together anymore and that she didn't love me anymore, I wasn't prepared to lose her to eternity. And on that same note, I will say I always wanted to be me. I never wanted to be a mom. It's so hard, and such a sexist society as ours. I was able to be the dad and not have to worry about the stuff that I now have to do every day, because this is my role now. My role is, even though I'm calling myself dad and my kids call me dad, I'm their mom. I have to do all the mom jobs, and there's nobody else but me to shoulder this. So I do it, and I don't do it grudgingly. I do it because I love them. I couldn't imagine anything else. I didn't even hesitate. I think I wrote an email to my boss to let him know that I was resigning before I even left Los Angeles, because I went right to the airport when I got the news that she was passing. Nothing is harder than that. Hardest day of my life was 9/11 up until January 20th. And it compels me to tell you guys as a couple and everyone else I meet when I have them offer their condolences, I say, please ask the person you love what you would want them to know if you couldn't tell them. Because we had that conversation. We may not have been living like a married couple, the irony being that we were a same-sex couple, but we were still loving each other as co-parents, and we had a very crucial conversation a few months ago about what she would want if she were not to survive. So knowing that, it made things easier. And I just ask everybody out there to consider asking your loved one, as much as it hurts to have that conversation, to understand that if you have it while you're still kicking and breathing, it'll be a lot better than if you have to guess.
Yeah, I can only imagine the dynamics and the things that you went through. I mean, it just, I have, 5 children from a previous marriage, and, my ex never wanted to go through any of the changes of transition with me. But I just can't imagine actually what it is that you're dealing with, because, your kids are your world and your kids are your heart, and you never expected to go it alone, and it's hard, it's just hard.
Well, it's important to know. Yeah, when we talked about me transitioning, we talked about me transitioning at home with the family around me, and that would be what I would have preferred. When I finally decided I had to, and I made it official, that was not what she wanted anymore. And I'm not going to kick the mother of my children out to the curb, so I walked out. She asked me to leave. She asked me to, you know, she asked me to find another place to live, and so I did. And it took a long time before I was welcomed back here again to live, because I basically had no place else to go except for the homeless shelter. She, yeah, transition was hard. Leaving my children was hard. I feel for yourself and other people who are trans who don't have contact with their children. I'm very blessed in that regard. And because we were still married, everything is so much easier at this point in my life. Should it have been different, I'm sure all those who are divorced from their spouses understand how impossible it would have been for me to just pick up where I left off like I have. So I'm fortunate for circumstances, but yeah, I've had more than the usual amount of drama. I have a friend who asked me once, she said, "Why do you always create all this drama around yourself?" And I'm like, it's a magnet. I don't create it. It follows me. I would love to find a way forward which was absent of drama. That's my goal in life.
You mentioned earlier that your wife said she equated Dawn with the removal of the person she loved the most. I think it's important for individuals that are not even trans just to realize that when you love a person, you're not loving just a gender or a genitalia, that you're loving a whole person. And I think we kind of went through that, because when I detransitioned, even though you were supportive, it was almost like I took away the man that you fell in love with, and came all the way down and almost killed yourself falling off a mountain. And I think it's something, maybe they need to teach us this in school. They need something where instead of just sex education, they need to really dwell into gender identity a bit more, so that when things like this take place, the person you love doesn't feel like all of a sudden you're getting a stranger, because in the end, it's the same person.
Well, there was a time where they didn't teach sex ed in schools, and maybe in 10 to 20 years, because it's going to take that long, maybe they'll teach about gender identity in schools. But I agree it's necessary. I just think because they're trying to outlaw us, it's not going to happen anytime soon. There are schools, believe me, there are schools where it's taught. The school where my spouse taught and my current 13-year-old middle school child attends has pink triangles throughout the school declaring this is a safe space for LGBTQ. And there's a trans child in her school. So if it's not being taught as a lesson, it's being taught in the hallways, it's being taught in the bathrooms, it's being taught in their practice of accepting this transgender student. And I may live in a progressive town here in Connecticut, but I'd like to think that there are others like it throughout the country, in most parts or several parts. I wish it was more.
I think that every individual has a form or some little bit of different energy, male energy and female energy in them. And I think more and more people became in touch with that. I think they would be a lot more accepting of trans individuals, because some of us, I mean, I know that I have a male and a female side of me. And when I was detransitioning, I started rediscovering that female side of myself, which was really great, because I kind of pushed that side away when I was growing up because of pain, of all the sexual abuse and things like that I went through. So during my detransition, I almost became acquainted again with that female side. And I think that everyone has a little bit of both in them, some more than others. And if we all learn to accept that, or get to discover that other part of us, then I think the transgender paradigm wouldn't be so difficult for people to see or understand. I mean,
I'd love to have cisgender people examine that too, because let's face it, there are lots of women who have masculine sides, there are lots of men who have feminine sides. And it doesn't make you a fairy just because you have a feminine side. It doesn't make you a butch or a man because you're a woman who has a masculine side. I think we also put too many labels on things personally. I think we could do a lot better than masculine and feminine if we wanted to. We wanted to talk about aggression or sympathy or bitchiness, whatever you want to call it. I think one of the things that a lot of trans women don't look at honestly, and Lena, maybe you can explore this. Some of us have not dealt with the fact that we were socialized as males, and not all of us were, but a lot of us were. And those of us who were socialized as males don't necessarily just erase that or forget that when we start dressing according to our authentic gender. A lot of us carry this male aggression as a badge of honor. And honestly, guys, you got to lose that. It's not doing you any favors. I can't tell you how many aggressive trans women I've had to run against in terms of just wishing they would just learn how to collaborate and learn how to be more understanding of what it takes to move forward. Instead, it's this I must win drama that I can't stand it.
Brute force, and things that, because I've been both, and I've lived and dated a lot of trans women, so I could say that, yes. And it's once you really dwell in that, I mean, you make peace with yourself with that, things become a lot easier.
And everyone's individual. You can't. I don't mean to stereotype, but it's common.
Yeah, very common.
No, it's very common because, I mean, let's face it, you're socialized as a male to be that type of a male, and that's how, the world around us rewards alphaness,
Yeah. Also, a lot of us have also embraced the alphaness to try and mask the feminine side. I mean, how many cops and military people have we encountered in our trans journey in which it's a real macho type guy who nobody would ever suspect is really trans? And it's because they didn't know how to deal with the fact that they didn't feel macho, but they had to pretend or put on a face that. I was fortunate. I was involved in the arts and commercials and acting and modeling. So for me, makeup and dressing up and everything was all sort of, part of expected lifestyle. But I hate that word. But my point is that for me, it wasn't such a large jump from being a sensitive guy to being the woman I am. But I will admit that I can relate to the people who see me as I present myself now and think of Fatball Dawn and say, gosh, whatever happened to that guy? I know, I look nothing like who he was, and that's deliberate, and that's part of me finding myself and my true self. And, a lot has been made that I just pranced into the newsroom at ABC and said, call me Dawn, wearing a little black dress as if I just surprised everybody. That day was a day that had been preceded by meetings. They met with employees at ABC for 2 days, little groups of 3. They showed a picture of me. They made sure everybody felt comfortable. It was like this big, project before I came out. And then when I finally did show up at work, it was after I took a day off for people to be able to say, okay, we can deal with this. And it was a Friday, so that if there were problems, the weekend would allow everyone to breathe again. And more people came up to me that day and said, oh, I see you now. Because they didn't see Don wearing a dress or a wig. They saw Dawn. They saw the person I was. That's what I want people who are worried about transitioning at work to know. If you plan it, if you don't surprise people, if you go in there with your bosses knowing that you have the right, you have the government behind you, you have the laws behind you, depending on where you live, you will be able to get through this because hopefully you're in a supportive environment. The only caveat I add to that is, in a corporate environment, I think after you transition, after you're accepted, after you've established some kind of track record in your authentic gender, get out. Find yourself another job. Go someplace new where you're only known as the gender you want to be. I wish I had done that. I wish I had left ABC and gone somewhere else. And even though, all right, the headlines didn't exactly make me a stealth, I still think it would have been better than staying at ABC and having all the headlines and everything else that happened to me. That's my only, 20 hindsight regret that I didn't move on. I was so happy to have a full-time job. I thought I'd be there forever.
I want to address the passing of your wife, and the question that
Sure.
I have set up is, how has the dynamic changed between your kids and family since the passing of your wife?
Well, I've already told you. Yeah, I don't want to talk about my children specifically, but I will tell you that the transition thing is old news for them. My 9-year-old was 7, and when his friend said, "Oh, you can't call her your dad. She's your other mommy now," he said, "No, no, no. She's my dad." So the kids are cool. They are 100% cool, and it's still a little weird. I mean, we're swimming in a pool. I'm wearing a bathing suit that I would wear because I'm a woman, and my little 9-year-old's calling me dad. Okay, we get a couple of looks. It's 2016. Grow up, folks. My kids don't have an issue with my transness. I think that we all are heartbroken over the loss of my wife and their mom. She was the heart of our home. We are dealing with a wound that won't close. It's a hole. It will always be in our hearts. But you learn to live with that hole, and you learn to live for her and to do things that would make her happy. Should she be watching or with us? So I've dedicated myself to them, and nothing's more important in my life. I'd say that the dynamic is that I am surrounded by supportive family members and friends and neighbors and Cub Scout parents and synagogue member families and just wonderful people who have pitched in. We created a GoFundMe account, and people I don't even know on Facebook have responded incredibly. And my brother-in-law has set up a scholarship fund for my kids, and it's wonderful because this is a way of people. There are people who don't think that they want to contribute to anything involving me because there's bias, because there are people who think that I'm a fetishist or I need to stop pretending to dress up like a woman and start living like a man. I'm the man up, I was told. So for those people who don't want to have me involved in any way and they just want to help my kids, we created a fund. And at first I was very upset about the fact that there were people who would, put that as a prerogative. And I said to my relative, I said, I don't want their hate money. And then I thought about it. I said, you know what? I need their hate money. I've got to raise my kids. I have to put my kids through college. What am I going to do? So we created the fund. And that way, there's no question about whether I'm going to get a boob job and move to Tahiti. This money's going to the kids. The relatives and the family have been wonderful. I think it's hard because for all intents and purposes, except for legally, my ex and I were divorced. And I call her my ex because that's what she wanted. She wanted to very much be divorced. It didn't take place. And I'm sorry that she didn't get her, as she put it, dying wish. She really wanted to be divorced. She wanted to have a new life, wanted to reclaim her name. Can I blame her for that? I mean, I can't. She didn't bargain for this. She didn't marry me thinking, gee, I hope in 20 years he becomes a woman. No. She wanted a husband. She deserved a husband. I thought I was going to be her husband.
That's very much true. What you're saying are words of truth, because our exes never signed up for this.
No.
And
they shouldn't be punished. And as much as we feel, they create a villain and somebody has to be blamed. Someone has to take the heat. My wife was very supportive of my transition. She knew that it was killing me not to be who I was. And I'm telling you right here and now, I would have given up everything for her to live. And I offered that. I offered to go back. I offered to become a man who is not presenting as a woman anymore. Or shall I say, I guess the accurate way would be, I offered to be the woman who presented as a man again, to make her happy. And you know what? She rejected it outright because she knew it wouldn't be genuine. I'd be acting. I'd be pretending. I just wouldn't be wearing my hair. I wouldn't be wearing my clothes. I would be tying my boobs down. It's not good enough. She wanted a real man, an authentic man. And I didn't like the fact she called me inauthentic, or she called men who are cisgendered real. No, I didn't like that. But I couldn't be the man she deserved. And the bottom line is, she deserved a full full life with happiness, and I will forever regret the fact that I couldn't bear to be apart from her. I should have ended it years ago. You know, you, Lena, I'll give you credit. Hats off to you. You were able to say, I've got to go be me. I was weak. I loved my wife, and I couldn't bear not being with her, and I wanted to find a way to have my cake and eat it too, but I couldn't. I had to be me. And she knew that, and she encouraged me to go find my dream. And I was living it in California. I got to tell you, I was so happy out there. And then cancer comes along. And you know what? You never know what's going to happen. So long story short, the family has a missing member, but we are 4 who love each other very much. And buoyed by our supporters and friends, we're going to keep on going. And I love my kids more than anything in the whole world, and I'm very lucky that they love me.
If you had the chance to talk to your wife one last time, what would you tell her?
As she lay dying in the hospital, unconscious, my 17-year-old son called me on the phone. I had missed the flight to make it by 11 o'clock that night. It was like 2 in the afternoon. I missed it by just a few minutes, but I got a flight out that would get me there the next morning. I got red eye. He calls me and he says, I'm going to hold the phone up to Mom's ear so you can say goodbye too. And I didn't have anything prepared for this, and I really wasn't ready for that. I didn't even think that was something I would like. It didn't occur to me. And here he is, this wonderful man, this man of the house. And he held the phone to her ear, and I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't the person you needed. And I'm sorry that I let you down. And I'm sorry that you're suffering. And I want you to be happy. And I'm sorry that I couldn't be there. And I also think that maybe you're happy I'm not. But either way, I love you always and everywhere. And I miss you. And I wish that we could have found a way forward. But I hope that you'll always remember that I loved you. And I do, to this day. I still love her. So the bottom line would be, I'd say I'm sorry, and I love you.
What actually caused you to move across the country in the first place, and do you doing so?
Didn't have a job. I was working for the Advocate. I don't think I'm telling stories out of school. LGBT media pays crap. So I was writing for the Advocate and working for a video company. I made $15 an hour at the video company, about 20 to 30 hours a week. I was working for the Advocate at the rate of $500 a month, and summer was coming. My wife was a school teacher. We would be dependent on my salary for the summer. I had just been fired from ABC the summer before, and things were really rough because I didn't have unemployment almost all that whole summer. We had no income, and I didn't want a repeat of the summer of 14 where we had basically nothing and we were living out of a food basket at the town hall where they have food for the poor, a food pantry, and relatives kicking in, giving us money to pay the bills, keep the lights on, things like that. So the Advocate offered me this job as news editor, and they said the only requirement is you got to move to LA. And although Wendy was opposed to it, she says, well, try and find a way forward together. I said, no. I said, even though there's an expense involved, they're going to pay for me to move, and I'll get a cheap apartment and a second job, and I'll move to LA. Second job didn't turn out such a good idea. These days, to have a second job, you need to be able to work 40 hours a week part-time. And I worked 50 to 60 hours already at the Advocate, so I just didn't see how I could possibly, give that kind of commitment to a part-time job. If I could have, if I was superhuman, if I wasn't 51 years old, maybe I could have done it. But I'm an old lady, so I moved across the country, and it was great because the nice thing about it was I got to meet a lot of the people on Facebook that I had been friends with over the years, and I turned it into an adventure. I loved LA. Don't get me wrong at all. As much as I love my kids, I found myself in LA. I found a new direction for my life. I had lived there twice before and never loved it as much as I did this last May to January. So 8 months, roughly.
Yeah, I was living in Nashville at the time of my transition, and since work had dried up, I was a freelancer. I was used to, looking for work. So the opportunity that came up was to move back to an area that I had lived in for like 10 years, which was Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. And I moved there, and I wanted to start anew. I told my then wife that I wanted to be able to provide, and she thought it was a great idea. Well, really, she wanted just to get the freak out of Nashville. So anything would have been a good idea for her at that point. But I moved to Minneapolis. But the problem is, like you say, in transitioning and stuff at your work, that anybody that met you before, they're always going to be stigmatized, no matter how welcoming and accepting they are initially. They're always going to have this uncomfortableness with you. And
most people, not everybody. There were a lot of good people who completely embraced the new me, but there were those, like you said, who just couldn't get on board.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, though, that late transitioners face is that very severe prospect of financially losing it all, really, because it's hard to transition in your 40s, in your 50s.
Well, speaking of which, I wanted to give a shout out to the last time I was on your show. We were talking with Zoe Tour, and I wanted to say hi to Zoe if you're watching, because Zoe and I, just to everyone's surprise, buried the hatchet a long time ago. We had a really good conversation on the phone, and although we never got to meet in person, which was sort of a hope of mine, we were able to come to terms with our disagreements, and I do wish her well. And if she's watching, listening, reading, whatever, there's a woman who had a rough transition in terms of, just like me, she was in the public eye, and it's never easy in the public eye. I think every single step you make when you're in the public eye is magnified 12 times or more, and you don't really get the ability to just say, oops, I made a mistake, I want to go back and do something over again, because people are watching.
So what advice do you have for other late transitioners and their family in regards to their family dynamics?
Be honest. Don't lie. I deceived not only my wife, but myself. I wasn't doing it deliberately. I wasn't trying to sneak behind her back. I didn't want to lose her. I didn't want to admit that this was who I was. I thought it was something I could be. I started taking testosterone to try and become more masculine. I hid from her that I joined the gym as a woman. That was a really good plan until the membership card came in the mail. I opened up a mailbox at a UPS store so she wouldn't get my mail. I took time and attention from her and paid it to another woman, myself. Be honest. Tell your spouse how you feel. She may kick you out. He may kick you out. He may not understand. She may not understand. Read I'm Not There. She's Not There. I'm sorry. Sorry, Jenny. Jenny Boylan's book, She's Not There. Read it, memorize it, reread it, show it to your spouse. Read Gender Outlaw. Read all the gender books. Find information, find groups, watch the YouTube videos, talk to people, watch RealTalk. Get to understand what other people have done. I have a friend who tells me that I'm her trans anti-role model because I've made all the mistakes that she doesn't want to make. She wants to avoid them. Okay, that's fine. All I'm looking to do is tell people that if you're honest with yourself, if you're honest with your spouse, if you're honest with your family, it may be rough. They may not understand. You may have to go it alone. But through Facebook, through YouTube, through group meetings, through your gender therapist, you can find a way forward. And I got to tell you, unless you've tried it, you may think suicide is an option. And having tried twice, I know it's not. I know things do get better. I mean, things get worse too. I sat down with the rabbi for our family. I'm not Jewish, but my kids are, and my wife was. And he told me the greatest thing I've ever heard. He said, I can't tell you that this is going to get better. It's likely to get worse. And it did. But it won't stay this bad. Even if it gets worse, it won't be the same as it is now. And then it'll get a little bit better. You are created in God's image. He or she. You need to know nothing else except for that. Even my Catholic priest, I'm like Roman Catholic, I'm not so sure that even he would be able to say that to me. And I was really lifted by that in spiritual insight. I'm not saying that you have to be spiritual to be trans. A lot of people are agnostic or atheist. Whatever, that's your prerogative. But I found great comfort in that. And I would say that if faith is what you're into, lean on it. If you have friends, they may look at you like you got two heads. But if they love you, they're going to come around. And more than that, you have to love yourself. I wish I had the courage that so many other people did to identify this earlier on and spare so many people so much pain and hardship. My son was bullied because I couldn't be smart enough to wear a frickin' compression shirt. I mean, I'm a 44D and I'm walking around in a t-shirt. People are going to start talking about that. Who's the guy with the boobs? And my kid got picked on because of that.
That's one of the fears that my ex had, was any repercussions going on to the children, and told me, you know, when you do leave, because she's like, I know you are going to leave because this is never going to work.
Yeah.
I wanted a man. That's what I signed up for.
Right.
Please leave quietly, you know. And it's been, you know, I was very vocal on Facebook, and she never once commented, said anything about me or anything. She just took the high road and walked her way and walked away from me in the most, like, you know, trying to leave no wake behind her.
Right.
And I tried to do the same thing in a way, because I didn't want to let everything else that was happening with me bleed over onto my children. And
that's the hardest part, is when the kids become pawns in this. And a lot of spouses use the children for guilt, or they make the kids feel bad. This is not necessarily an angry wife thing. This is husbands too. And, you know, it's got to be very hard on the kids already. You know, we sat down, I'm in the room right now that we sat down with each of our 3 children and told them about my transition. They'd already known about me having feminine features. They knew that I had modeled as a girl when I was a teenager. And they knew I was living outside the house, but they didn't know why. And when we told them, it was crushing. But it was over. They had to get through it. It was like a really bad injection. Ouch! It hurts. And then we moved on. We moved on to new normal. Get it. I'm sorry, Mark.
honesty is something that's very important, and you mentioned that earlier because
Most important, absolutely.
at the beginning of a relationship, right before marriage, right before anything happens, this is one of those things that has to be brought to the forefront.
I agree. Marco Rubio moment here for a second.
But it's,
There we go.
in a lot of cases, most are not honest, and they feel that by hiding it, they're doing themselves and others a justice. It's contrary. They're doing everyone and themselves an injustice. So
It was a really stupid move on my part. I'm going to just call it that. It was dumb because I thought I was saving my marriage. You know what I was doing? I was prolonging pain. And I think it would have been really hard for us to have broken up when my little guy, who's now 9, was like 4 or 5. Because 2006, 2000... By 2008, I was in gender therapy. But I was trying to undo it. I was trying to stop it. I was trying to, how do I cure this? I tried hypnosis. I saw a hypnotherapist who was supposed to supplant my feelings of being feminine with masculine thoughts. And she says, okay, you're on a beach, and go to your place where you feel the most comfortable, the most at peace with the world. And I think of the beach. I think of the ocean. She says, where are you? She says, I'm on a beach. She says, what are you doing? And I said, my feet are in the sand and I'm watching the waves come in. She says, what are you wearing? I said, a blue bikini. I mean, even in hypnosis, it's just, that's who I am, I mean, okay, a lot thinner. You can't change who you are through hypnosis. And I should have, in 2009, even 10, I just needed to face the facts. And that would have been 5 years of my life that I would have been already transitioned, and they would have had a life maybe with a new father and a new husband for my wife. I don't know. I'm not sorry that didn't happen, because I love my wife and I love my kids, but I feel bad that I was very selfish.
Well, I think
the way around it
is that we try to prolong it so that we can get over it, we can overcome it, we can be cured of it. Some of us use marriage as that stepping stone in order to distance ourselves from what that feeling is and how we sense that in our lives. And the fact is, we just bring more people into the fray, and more people get injured, more people get damaged. So,
but also, don't forget, we're also denying ourselves for the longest time. And it takes a long time. And I want people out there to understand, if you're not ready to transition, you shouldn't. And that's the advice I got. And that's why I didn't do it. I mean, I got to be realistic here. I didn't come out because I wasn't 100% sure and ready. I was really scared. And it took me until it was January of 2013. I took my kid to an event in Washington, changed in the car, or in the hotel bathroom, and went to a party with one of my oldest transgender friends, and decided that night in the Washington hotel, I have got to live this way. I can't stop being who I am. It's not right to just do this on a lark. It's got to be all the time. And I decided for my birthday that year, I took 5 days. My brother-in-law every year goes on a golfing outing to Arizona or someplace by himself for his birthday every year. I decided to take a cue from that, and I went on a trans vacation. I went and visited friends I had on Facebook as myself. And instead of it just being a day or a weekend, I had 5 days of living authentically. Driving, going to rest stops, everything. It was awesome. I went back to ABC. I went into the room to change. There's a bathroom where I could change by myself and no one would know. I looked in the mirror and I saw his face staring back at me, and I didn't recognize it as mine. And I knew it had to happen. And that's when I went home next day and I said, I've got to do this. And it was March, and then April. It was April. So a month later, I came out. And I'm just saying to all those folks out there who think, gee, I wonder if I should, I shouldn't. Until you know, until you're ready, you should wait. And as much as I wish I had done it in 2010 or whatever, I wasn't ready. And you know what? You probably read the headlines. Even then I wasn't ready, because a month after I came out, or was it 2 months? May, June, July. By July, I was in a hospital thinking I was Don again with this amnesia thing. And my body, for whatever reason, hit a circuit breaker, and everything about my life just went poof until I could put it all back together again. Craziest time I've ever had in my entire life was that.
I think a lot of people think that there's a special moment to do it, and I don't really think there is this perfect moment. I think from the time you know, and I know we're not all about transitioning young children right away, but I think there's a time when you're a youth and you know and you feel that you know, then that's the time when you should at least start living your life as the person you feel you are. Because the longer you wait, as you mentioned earlier, the more you're hurting people. You're getting married, having children, and doing things that, then you're taking hostages and you're taking other people in as prisoners. When you're by yourself, not married, not whatever, then you're your own person, and you're only hurting yourself.
Well, that's all fine and good, but I mean, I think most late transitioners don't realize it until they've already put themselves in that situation. I mean, sure, if I had known in my 20s that I was transgender, which wasn't a word back then, back in the dinosaur days, I never would have courted and then married the love of my life. But I'm so glad I did, because I have 3 beautiful children as a result of that. And although I thought I was different, I never thought I was what transgender turns out to be. I think it takes us some time, those of us who are late, because we don't really put all the T's crossed and the I's dotted. It just doesn't connect until sometime later in life. Were there signs that I look back now and say, oh, gosh, of course I was trans. Yeah, sure. I go back and I look at all those things. But at the time, no. I'm sure Lynna and Mark, you the same way. You didn't necessarily think that if somebody walked up to you and said, hey, you're really a girl, you're really a boy, come with me, we're going to turn you into the right gender. No, I don't think that's wonderful for today's kids, but I know for a fact that I would have refused to do that at a younger age, just because I wasn't sure. I didn't know. God bless these kids who do know.
We didn't know about it. I always thought I was different because I was going back and forth. There wasn't a name or anything. So when I first heard about it, and I didn't truly hear about it until I was 38 years old.
I hear you. The same here. I knew when I was in a all-girls school performing in the chorus of South Pacific that I wanted nothing more than to hide somewhere and to go to that school and to be one of the girls instead of going back to my all-boys Catholic high school. But I didn't have a word for that. I mean, the only word we had, pardon the expression, was fag or fairy or things like that. And that's not what I felt like. I didn't feel like that. I just knew that something was amiss. And, so it's funny, on the show I Am Kate, somebody asks one of the children of Caitlyn Jenner, when did you first realize you were a girl? And Jenner says, I remember growing up that I would look at boys and think, wow, I wonder what that must be like to just be a boy. And that really resonated for me, to know that when I was looking at other children who were assigned male at birth, that I would be jealous of the fact that they were just boys. They didn't feel like girls inside.
So talking about Caitlyn, how did your interview go? And how do you feel about her representation of our community and her recent political affiliation news?
Let's just say that even though it's news, her political swing is not recent in any way. She's a conservative, dyed-in-the-wool, and very much so. And I think that the surprise, I guess, was that of all the candidates she could have picked, she picked the most anti-trans one there is. She was not giving an endorsement. She made that very clear. She's just expressing a preference. Even the words trans ambassador was something I created when she described what role she'd want to play in a future possible Cruz administration. And she bought it, and it became a headline. I got to tell you, the interview went very well. We were very pleasant toward one another. She's very effusive, very gushing. Big hug when I walked in the door. It really took me aback at first because I'm like, I'm here for an interview, and she treated me like I was an old friend, which is really lovely. And we really got along very well, even when we talked about the contentious stuff. I'm not the first trans journalist to ever ask her a question, but I'm the first one she invited into her home to sit down and put questions to her that the trans community wanted to hear. I've worked very hard over the last year to try and get this interview, and I wanted to do it because I felt like all the interviewers have been people who represent mainstream American society and not us. And I wanted someone to be able to ask the questions that we have been asking for so long. And she answered all of them in some way or another. I think the hardest part for me was not that she talked about Ted Cruz in the way she did, because I have lots of friends who have conservative backgrounds and have friends who support, who are against abortion, and Christian fundamentalists and gun owners. I have lots of friends of different backgrounds. I don't necessarily think they're evil people. I just think they're different opinions. The hard part for me was when Caitlin spoke about her girls and about how she wanted the community to understand that, she is someone who, how do I put this best? She sees the show as about the girls and about the women on the bus. She calls them the girls, and she wants people to embrace them. But so many of us see her life as something we can't achieve, something we can't identify with, as something out of reach, that I think she's out of touch in that way, in that we wish she would be a more accessible person, and she's just not. It's not a fault of hers. It's just she's an old WASP millionairess living on a mountain. And got more power to her. It's the American way. She's got money. Why shouldn't she buy a plane? Why shouldn't she rent a tour bus and go around the country? Hey, if I had money, maybe I'd do that. But I got to ask you this. I keep getting told that there's a lot of people hating on me for doing the interview. I wasn't doing it to take her down. I wasn't doing it to make me bigger. I was just doing it because that's my job. I ask people questions, and I really wanted to get her to answer these questions. And it's a shame that the headline became the Ted Cruz thing, because for me it was still about her talking to trans people, which I do wish she did more of.
We kind of touched upon this in the beginning. I said I was going to go back to it.
Sure.
You and I share something in common, and that's that we both detransitioned and transitioned back. I personally think it's very healthy and natural to question things, only to get more clarity in the end. How do you feel? I mean, did you feel that it gave you more clarification of who you are?
There's two things I felt. A lot of it is a blur because that's what amnesia does to you. It's like Swiss cheese memory. And I have people who told me what happened during that time because I don't remember all of it. But I will tell you this. For whatever reason, I got back all my memories except for those about my transition and about my transgender identity. And then I got a letter in the mail. Sorry, let me just turn that off, because a rival radio show wants to talk to me. How do we turn this off?
Oh, it'll be so
There it is. Okay. Don't know how to turn. I'm sorry. Volume. There we go. Okay. Still going. So, funny, wasn't it? I got a letter in the mail. I'm living as Don Ennis. I'm going back to work at ABC as Don Ennis. And the letter comes to Ms. Dawn Ennis, and it's from the National Institute of Health, and it's a report on a week worth of exploratory examinations that they did to try and figure out why my body went through so many weird changes. And inside this report, it says, Dawn Ennis, a woman born male, a successfully transitioned woman, And I read that and I realized, that's me. That's me. I'm this person. And the memories came flooding back. And I was crying, and I hugged my roommates, and I told them, I said, I can't do this. I can't be this person I'm pretending to be again. And I started, this was September. By October 1st, I was dressing as myself again, except at work. And I decided I would give it enough time to sort of settle down, and I had to be me again. I think what detransition did for me was it gave me clarity about who I really am. And I'll tell you something else it did. This was the shocker of all time. People asked me after I transitioned, they said, well, you're gay, right? Because you're married to Wendy, so you must be gay, lesbian. And I said, oh, I guess so. Oh, yeah, I only have loved one woman for 19 years. I must be a lesbian. When I reclaimed my identity, I found myself attracted to men. I found myself attracted to men in a way I had never, ever been attracted before. I never dated a man. I never found a man sexually attractive. I think men basically were dirty, smelly, and hairy, and selfish and vain and everything else. Sorry, Mark. But I just didn't find them sexually interesting to me. And in my retransition, for lack of a better word, oh man, I fell hook, line, and sinker. I'm looking forward to the days in which, after my children are in a point where they feel more comfortable with our new life, that hopefully I will be able to find someone who will make me happy. Wendy was the love of my life, but I don't think she loved me as much as I need to be loved. She loved me as much as she could, and she couldn't love the person I am, and that's no fault of hers. She loved men, and I'm not one. And I'm hoping there's a man out there that I will be able to someday meet. Just not right now. I got enough stuff going on. But that's what detransition was for me. Detransition for me was a circuit breaker. It was oh, wait a minute. This is not settled. And it was a weird time. I'm not going to deny it. I'm sure people were freaked out. I'm sure people thought I was crazy. And I wish it didn't make headlines. But here's the thing, Mark. You and I do have this in common. The difference between someone who hasn't detransitioned and someone who has is as big as a difference as those who have attempted suicide and those who have never tried it. You may not understand it until you've been there. And I don't want people to try it. I just want people to understand that just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean you can't validate it.
Exactly. And it's important. I'm glad that I actually went through it. Me, out of all people, I never thought I was going to go through that. 13 years living as Mark. And it was really strange. It was harder to detransition than it was actually to transition. But I don't regret it. It actually made us closer. I mean, when I returned as Mark, I could just see it in her eyes. It's like, it almost felt like we had a breakup and we're separated for years and then returned back. And it was just like the most amazing feeling ever. And but it allowed me to know that Linda loves me no matter what. Because she was there by my side. Maybe not really liking what I was doing, but she was there and showing me how much she loves me. And that just really cemented our relationship even further.
Good for you.
It's
Good for you.
I think that one of the most beautiful parts about a relationship that like ours is that, like you were saying, someone to love all of us, not just the part that they accept, but every single fiber of our being. And
that's something that happened to us when I was living as Don again in that in-between time. Even though I was presenting as Don, I still had to bind my breasts. I still had to deal with the fact that I didn't have a way to make her to please her, and I felt like less of a man. And I asked her. I said, "Well, how's this going to work for us?" And she's like, "Look, what's between your ears matters more to me than what's between your legs and between your arms, and we'll deal with it. But as soon as I started feeling that I'm attracted to men and I'm hiding the fact that I'm really feeling feminine again, and I'm reclaiming my womanhood, and I'm realizing that I'm on the wrong track, that's when our journey ended for sure in terms of our marriage, because that's the most important part, is that you have to be in to the other person mentally and attracted to that other person. And it's not just the physical. I'm glad that you two have the whole ball of wax. I'd say to anybody who is out there who is worried about their spouse accepting, there are spouses who do accept, but the majority don't. And you need to accept that. I was very blessed. I had so many friends who are trans whose spouses accepted them. It's not the norm. And it fooled me into thinking that my wife would be like that too, and she wasn't. It's just not the norm.
What I want to get out of my detransition is I want people to understand that there are people out there that will question themselves. And we as a community, we need to stand by our detransitioning brothers and sisters as well, because they need us as much as we need people that we're initially transitioning.
Yeah. And please make sure they understand they can detransition. They can detransition.
We can't even talk about it. We all tongue twisted.
But don't fool yourself into thinking you're not trans. Just because you're not living as a transition person, you're still trans. It's just that you're living in a closet again. And I keep quoting Jenny Boylan, but for me, she's very much a mentor. When I told her I was going to have to, live as Don again because that's all I knew, she said, look, you're still loved, but you're living in a closet, and you need to accept that. It's a really hard thing to have to accept, that you live the rest of your life denying who you truly are. But for financial reasons and other reasons, it's necessary. It's necessary because some people can't take hormones for medical reasons. It's necessary because they don't want to lose their job. It's necessary because they don't want to lose their spouse. It's the kind of thing that I wish everybody could experience, but not everybody can.
But that's like saying, that there is no person that's trans. You're not just like trans enough. It's people would say, oh, the surgery, oh, the HRT, that makes you trans enough. But the fact is that there are many transgender individuals that don't choose to live full time because they just can't, physically or financially.
And so it's a big umbrella, and we all need to stick together and help one another, and because it's hard enough as it is.
But on that, whenever you decide that you're ready to move forward with the relationship or anything comes along, I would highly suggest you try finding a relationship with a trans man, because they get you, they understand, they know where you've been.
Well, I mean, let's face it, the trans man of choice is taken already. No, Mark, I'm sorry, you're not my type. But but I would say this. I would say I'm open to any kind of man. I have had a few dates. I've had someone I considered my boyfriend, and he was cisgendered, and it was something that opened my eyes. And I'm probably not going to experience that kind of openness here in Connecticut like I did in LA. But look, bottom line is that I'm not in the position for a long time to be dating. I've got 3 kids. I'm not a mom, but I've got to do all the jobs of a mom.
Well, do you feel that you're returning to your children's life and taking on the responsibility as the primary caretaker will lead to any more changes in your transition?
Yeah, I'll say this. The last 2 months, I've been very much just throwing clothes on and getting through the day. I haven't really been able to fem it up because we're just existing, But I had to step up my game to go to the Castle Kardashian in Malibu and not look like a schlump when I went to go see Caitlyn Jenner. And that sort of reawakened in me that, I can look pretty good. I can clean up all right. So I'd say that I want to look good and I want to get myself healthy. I want to get myself fit. I want to get myself in a way in which I will live a long life for my kids. And that means taking good care of myself. And as you know, Lena, it's so much harder for us to lose weight. It's so much harder for us than men to stay fit. And between hormones and everything else, I'm fighting a losing battle. So I think that my role as a homemaker and stay-at-home parent is going to change my transition only in terms of that I need to stay focused on being a healthy person. And being a healthy person includes taking my injections, and I'm on a very mild dose of estradiol, and my testosterone levels have been 0 since 2011. So I'm not on a serious hormone regimen, but it's enough for just maintenance, and that's included in my daily, taking care of myself. A lot of people use the analogy of if you're on a plane, they tell you to put the oxygen on yourself first before you give it to the kids. Life is like that. You need to be able to take care of yourself to take care of others.
Exactly. That's very important. And that's one of the things that, as an advocate for years, I've always tried to tell my brothers and sisters that because we are on hormones, you need to take care of yourself so much more than the average individual. Working out is a lot harder. Losing weight is a lot harder. And you really, really have to break things down and, focus.
Well, for trans women,
especially, it's very hard.
harder.
Oh, so hard.
Yeah.
You're fighting a losing battle.
But trans guys could also, because if you're overweight and you start taking testosterone, you will get even fatter. So you have to lose that weight first before you start taking testosterone. If you are an MTF, you need to start taking that weight off before you get on the dose of estrogen, because estrogen automatically makes you gain.
Oh, it sure does. I mean, it redistributes fat, but it also puts on fat. And I will tell you that the having taken both testosterone and estrogen, first of all, I don't know if a lot of women have experienced this, but testosterone can be converted in the body to estrogen, which is what happened to me. That's like pouring oil onto a fire. So it's the worst thing you could possibly do in my situation. But you need to understand that there are emotional effects for both. Mm-hmm. Testosterone will get you in a position where you just might not be thinking clearly or making sound and rational decisions. Estrogen could be putting you in a position where everything makes you cry. Everything makes you in an emotional wreck, and you can't possibly feel like you can deal. There are emotional components to these HRT, and I want people to be aware of the ramifications. It's not just grow boobs and grow a beard.
And it's not so much even just those two powerful hormones. We're talking about progesterone, spironolactone. I mean, all these combine to be a potential,
an atomic bomb. Making this. I mean, it does. It affects every part of you: your mental state, your emotional state, your health. So it's something that I really like to see more focus on is education.
It's a recent thing. You think about it; they haven't been doing this for very long. Mm-hmm. And I know in the past you've come out against a lot of the medications and things, but what I do want to say is they've been doing it long enough that we know it's not killing us, but there hasn't been enough growth in terms of, well, what is it doing to us? How does it change us? What are we starting with? I mean, there's all these questions about whether our brains are different.
Right.
I only know this. Every trans woman I know, when they take estradiol or estrogen, they feel a calmness. They feel a peacefulness. They also feel an emotional component, but they overall tend to feel less anxiety. And most trans men that I've known, when they take testosterone, feel the power and the strength that they've always wanted, the inner motivator that makes them want to continue their transition. A friend of mine once said, if you give a cisgendered heterosexual male female hormones, he'll go crazy because it's doing everything to him he doesn't want to be. And I think that when you are trans and you start on HRT, if you have a positive effect, that should be your first indication that you are right on target.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we've asked all the questions and no calls or wait,
No call.
Aw,
no.
that was probably somebody calling before, so sorry about that.
So thank you so much and appreciate the time. I think your phone is ringing again, but thank you so much, Dawn, and don't be a stranger. And
I wish you both well, and I thank you very much for this invitation. I'm hopeful that your names will be appearing in the Advocate soon, and look forward to talking to you again.
thank you so much.